Matt, why don't you take it away?
Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Valier. I'm the Executive Director of the Patients' Rights Action Fund, or PRAF. I'll be your host today. For the benefit of some of our friends with disabilities, I'm a middle-aged man of color, dark wavy hair, dark trimmed beard, olive complexion, wearing a blue check shirt and a blue sweater, sitting in front of a knotty pine background. We have experts here for you today who will provide an in-depth societal and medical analysis and implications of SB 210, currently proposed in the Montana State Legislature, which would effectively overturn the Baxter decision, which cases rendered assisted suicide practice with impunity and with none of the typical yet generally flimsy safeguards and guardrails found in statutes that legalize assisted suicide passed in other states. Today we have Bradley Williams, who's the president of Montanans Against Assisted Suicide, Marcia Katz, a 50-year disability rights and advocate with advocacy and activism. She was a caregiver and end-of-life care for her beloved husband, Bob. The two of them were members of the disability rights organization Not Dead Yet since its inception in the mid-1990s. Dr. Carly Robertson is a Montana native and has been in general practice in north central Montana since 1984. And Dr. Craig Treptow is a family medicine physician practicing for the last 25 years in Great Falls, Montana. We may have Anita Cameron, who's the director of minority outreach of Not Dead Yet and a disability rights activist for nearly 40 years. She's also an ADAPT organizer. So Anita may or may not be able to join. And if she does, we'll include her in. For the panel and hosts, anyone who's not speaking, please do keep your mic on mute. If you can benefit from closed captions, just move your cursor around and the closed caption button is at the bottom. And you should be able to enable it and also change the size of the text as is best for you. So without further ado, Bradley, would you please start us off?
Sure. Thank you. It's always motivating to hear our opponent's testimony at a hearing. It really serves to refocus your emphasis. I appreciate this opportunity to respond to opponents of SB 210 falsely claiming during the Senate Judiciary hearing that assisted suicide is peaceful, that assisted suicide is dignified, and that assisted suicide is free of abuse. First, on the abuse, let's just lay out there human nature. March 1st is Disability Day of Mourning for those who have been killed by caregivers and relatives. Furthermore, premature forced deaths are neither peaceful nor the rapid, 25 to 72% of the time, quantified by a study by Bill Galazzaro. In addition, the drugs routinely used are the same drugs deemed to be undignified and cruel for death row. Another article confirmed. The Spectre published a great article by Dr. Zivit on September 18th, titled Assisted Suicide is Neither Painless Nor Dignified. Zivit explains that he is an expert witness opposing lethal injection executions in America. Zivit opens his article by provocatively stating, I am quite certain that assisted suicide is not painless or peaceful or dignified. In fact, the majority of the cases, it is very painful death. The death penalty is not the same as assisted dying, of course. Executions are meant to be punishment. Euthanasia is about relief from suffering. Yet, for both euthanasia and executions, paralytic drugs are used. These drugs, given in high enough doses, mean that the patient cannot move a muscle, cannot express any outward or visible sign of pain. But that doesn't mean that he or she is free from suffering. Then the claim of dignity is a smokescreen. The organ-type death protocols are far from dignified. Being forced by the facilitators to premature death after changing your mind is not dignified. By Oregon statistics, 33% change their mind. then allowing greedy heirs to be facilitators undermines dignity. Then finally, prohibiting investigations and requiring falsification of death certificates does not promote dignity, it only encourages abuse. Our Montana Supreme Court vacated the lower court's claim that assisted suicide is a constitutional right. Rightly so, since no state or federal court has ever made this claim. Unfortunately, they could not help themselves from attempting to legislate from the bench by declaring that consent could be a defense if one is charged with assisting a suicide, which remains a homicide in Montana. This is in direct conflict with our public policy discouraging suicide. This represents a carve-out for the medical industrial complex that is unnecessary. It is well known that children, teenagers, adults, and the medical industrial complex all need boundaries. My doctor, when asked about assisted suicide, said simply, in his entire career, it only came up once, and that was from a relative of the patient. It is unnecessary. We must put boundaries on the medical industrial complex to protect our individual rights from easy abuse. Abuse is publicly demonstrated by Colorado killing people with anorexia and by removing so-called safeguards after legalizing euthanasia. We know less about the private abuse because all of the Oregon type death acts prohibit investigations and require death certificates to be falsified. The system creates a perfect crime. Don't be fooled. What opponents call aid dying is aiding someone to kill themselves. Canada is moving to kill people that are homeless with no terminal condition. Apparently, being deemed not worthy of life puts us on the fast track to be eliminated. Sounds harsh? That is the foundation of the eugenic religion. Legalizing assisted suicide is just one facet of eugenics. Please do pass SB 210 and stop the spread of eugenic policies in Montana. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate your testimony there. Marcia, are you able to?
I'm going to try. Hi, I'm Marcia Katz. I am a 77-year-old white woman. I wear glasses, have white hair, and currently I'm wearing a blue and black buffalo check shirt. One of the things that I think is really important when we consider assisted suicide is that I'm frankly offended that the legislature considers anything that would promote assisted suicide in Montana. And even though the Baxter decision provided for a defense for people who consent for a defense for people who assist in suicides, the rest of the country thinks it's legal here. And I think we have to do everything we can to dissuade people from that notion. Currently, people with disabilities and older people are all pushed toward death by lack of proper health care, by lack of appropriate services and supports that they need in their own homes to live lives with dignity. And I'm very offended by the notion that people who are promoting assisted suicide call it death with dignity. If we don't first focus on life with dignity, you can't have a death with dignity. And there are people with disabilities and older people in this state who don't have the services and supports that they need and get pushed toward death then instead of being given lives of quality lives and quality of life. Codifying assisted suicide in any form can act as another incentive for disreputable and greedy relatives to push us toward an earlier death because they stand to benefit financially. That happens now without assisted suicide even. And so assisted suicide only makes that worse. It is essential that the laws in every state provide adequate pain relief, comfort care, and services and supports that people need to live with dignity before they start pushing people toward death with the codifying assisted suicide.
Thanks so much, Marcia. I really appreciate your providing those words of wisdom. Carly, Dr. Robertson, would you please continue our conversation.
I would be delighted to. Thank you. I speak very much in favor of Senate Bill 210. In this most simple terms, this bill is about saving innocent lives. It is about having a robust understanding of what it means to actually protect life. I absolutely agree with Marcia that unless you have had the opportunity to live with dignity, you cannot die with dignity. And we are far from aiding people in having a dignified life, such as in Canada. You have social challenges. Oh, we just kill you now. Anyway, the essence of Senate Bill 210 can be stated this way. The first proposition is it is wrong to kill innocent human beings. It is wrong to kill innocent human beings. The second proposition is patients not convicted in a court of law of a capital offense are innocent human beings. There are ways to say that someone deserves a death penalty. This is not it. The conclusion of those two propositions is that it is wrong to kill patients. Patients depend on medical care to alleviate suffering, not end their lives. One of the quickest ways to destroy the practice of medicine will be to make executioners the same as supposedly the healers. If you go to someone who is both, you had better ask, did someone pay more for my death than I paid for my life? Calling consent a defense to killing patients is nothing but a red herring. It simply distracts from the main conclusion, which is it is wrong to kill patients. Consent merely means that some who are more powerful for the moment can eliminate any other human beings who face for any reason, any other human being who for any reason gets in the way of their desires, and later beg a court of law not to convict them of illegal actions. Consent simply gives voice to the coercive power that results from inequities that are in reality. They are simply parts of reality. Parents and educators over children, lawyers over clients, doctors, or any other practitioners of the healing arts over vulnerable patients. Life is full of such inequities. Society has the duty to protect the more vulnerable of these. I support Senate Bill 210 because protecting innocent lives is simply the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Now we have Dr. Craig Treptow.
Thank you, Matt. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Craig Treptow. I'm a family practice physician in Great Falls, Montana, and I support SB 210. Senator Glim, who was a senator who sponsored this bill, talked about the confusion surrounding physician-assisted suicide in the state of Montana, and he's absolutely correct. I would agree. I've had patients come and ask me, so can my parents are in the nursing home and they have dementia, can we now do that physician-assisted suicide to them? And I have to explain, no, you can't. It's unethical. We shouldn't be doing that. Even national speakers don't know where Montana lies on this topic of physician-assisted suicide. So I have 3 points to make this morning. My first point is that we often use euphemisms and deception of language to divert attention from the actual purpose or act. So some now say aid in dying because it sounds so much more pleasant and gentle than physician-assisted suicide. The Hemlock Society changed its name to Compassion and Choices because it sounds so much better. But the essence is the same, where the physician, the healer, begets an act of violence and violation of the Hippocratic Oath by helping his or her patient to kill themselves. And is that really what we want physicians to do? Is that their calling? My second point is on depression. So it's sometimes difficult to diagnose depression in patients who are terminally ill. 25 to 30% of patients who are terminally ill are depressed, but only 10% are ever treated. A recent article in the JAMA magazine said that 59% of patients who ask for physician-assisted suicide are depressed. And shouldn't we be treating the depression rather than helping the patient kill themselves? The data from Oregon shows that we are not. And if so, why is that? who is protecting the patients? Isn't that what this bill is supposed to do? My final point is that there's an innate dignity in every human person that extends into the doctor-patient relationship. And in order for that relationship to work, both sides have to trust each other. Physician-assisted suicide deteriorates that trust. It's interesting, prior to the Hippocratic Oath, where there were no guidelines, people would go to see the self-proclaimed medical practitioners, and they didn't know if they would receive a poison or they would receive something to help them. And so because of that, over time, the Hippocratic Oath evolved. I have had patients ask me, are you one of those doctors who does physician-assisted suicide? And they explain, because they want to be able to trust their physician when they are in their most vulnerable state. And they don't want somebody who is likely to take advantage of them. They wanted to have a physician who would follow them to the end of their natural life. And so those are my three main points I wanted to share with you today. And I would encourage you to support SB 210. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Treptow. I'll just close by thanking all of the speakers today and for your particular expertise and your advocacy on this issue. Assisted suicide laws are dangerous and inherently discriminatory to people with disabilities by providing suicide help to a subset of people with disabilities, that is life-threatening disabilities, and providing, whereas in all other cases, you provide suicide prevention care and services. So we'll go to questions, but one of the thoughts that I want to leave people with is that this isn't about prosecuting doctors and making something this big problem. It's about protecting patients and providing the best possible end-of-life care. And when assisted suicide laws are on the table, they present their own difficulties, and those difficulties are only exacerbated by the fact that Montana, it is practiced there willy-nilly with no safeguards, no guardrails, no reporting, nothing. And that's not providing additional liberty to people who need protection in vulnerable circumstances. Is in fact giving them less choices by having third-party people involved who could be otherwise coercing them, and coercion always happens behind closed doors. So since we have one journalist on with us today, Daryl, if you have questions, you should feel free to ask them verbally rather than in the Q&A. And we will be distributing the recording to other journalists just for your information.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for your time. Thank you for your participation in this process. It's really important. I am Daryl Ehrlich. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Daily Montanan. You can't see me, but I live in Billings. I am male, middle-aged, graying, and I'm wearing a red hooded sweatshirt right now that says Nirvana on it. So that's who I am. Is your position, so I'm hearing two different things and I just would like some clarification. Is your position that, because we talked about the laws and the practices in other states, is your position that there are not adequate, there's no adequate laws or protections, and that would change your position? Or is that this is wrong in any circumstances regardless of rule?
May I speak to that, Mr. Villier?
Please.
This is Dr. Carly Robertson. Hello, Daryl. It's a good question. I think that there is no way to adequately control this action. There is no way to control human coercion, human power over another. There are no adequate ways to put the state in charge of collecting data that will adequately protect vulnerable people. This is wrong. It is wrong to kill innocent human beings. Patients not convicted in a court of law are innocent human beings. It is wrong to kill patients. The end. Amen. Consent is a red herring.
Daryl, this is Marcia Katz, and I not only want to emphasize what Dr. Robertson said, but I want to tell you that for a number of years, I worked in probate courts, sometimes as a special visitor and in cases where people were looking for guardianship and things. One of the things that became very clear to me is that there are no protections. If you try to use the court for protections, people, judges, as well as other workers in courts, all have biases about people with disabilities because they don't understand disability. And they often are, we would call them ableist, but we can't count on them to support the rights of people with disabilities and older people for that matter. So because so many people come with so many biases and so much ignorance, frankly, and don't understand disability, and so many people who say, well, I'd rather be dead than disabled. Those are things that you can't protect against. I mean, there's no way to put protections in there because of the human beings that are involved.
I have one
Marcia.
other comment. There is a physician by the name of Matthew Sleeth, Sleeth, who has written a book about suicide prevention. And exactly to your point, Marcia, he opens his book by telling about a young man who came in, had shot himself in the head, and wanted not to live. This young man came back to him years later as a disabled person. However, now he was a joy to his parents. He was a joy to his own life. He learned from his suffering. He did not need to be killed, but he learned.
If I may piggyback a little bit on that. So the American Medical Association has a code of ethics, and opinion E-5.7 states, physician-assisted suicide is fundamentally incompatible with a physician's role as healer, would be impossible to control, and would pose serious societal risks. That's what the American Medical Association says, and I think we're in agreement with that.
Currently, and this is Marcia again, currently, I think in every state, there are already provisions where physicians are able to provide pain medication for people, even knowing that at times that pain medication could cease respiration. So I've had both a brother die from cancer, a father die from cancer, and a husband die from cancer. And as mentioned earlier, I cared for my husband here at home, and he died in our bed. There is always the ability, if somebody chose or needed the level of pain medication that would cease respiration in order to be comfortable, that can happen. And that's already allowed in states. And we don't need anything more than that. We have what we need in law already. We don't need to codify killing people.
That is exactly correct, Marcia. Again, Dr. Robertson here. There is a concept called unintended consequences or double effect. And our intent is not to kill patients. Our intent is to alleviate suffering. And Marcia is absolutely correct that there are times when the results of our alleviation of suffering will have unintended consequences.
Thank you both very much. I would add just, I'm only speaking for the Patients' Rights Action Fund here. So we don't take any position on the ethical or moral implications of a person taking their own life. We're speaking and always speak directly to the public policy of assisted suicide. And to that end, whenever you're going to sequester off some group of people for a difference in the standard of care, when they express a desire to harm or kill themselves, and all of those people are people with disabilities, and when you're going to give suicide prevention care and services to everyone else who expresses a desire to harm or kill themselves, you've created a two-tiered system of medicine that results in death to the devalued group. And there's nothing that can, you can take something that's really bad and make it less bad, but you can't take something that's inherently discriminatory and make it non-discriminatory. These public policies, because they section off a group of people for disparate impact, at least the Patients' Rights Action one, we could simply never support any version, no matter what safeguards were put in place. I wanted to Anita Cameron was able to come on. Anita, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. I wanted to give her a minute or two to provide her comments today. Anita, please take the floor.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was late. Health issues going on, but I made it. Actually, I had prepared a statement because I tend to wander off, if you will. And, I can go on tangents. So if you don't mind, I'd like to so I was told to prepare for 5 minutes. I'll just read what I have. If you don't want to, give me a second. All right, thank you. So I'm Anita Cameron, and I'm Director of Minority Outreach for Not Dead Yet, and I'll give a brief description of myself. I'm a chocolate. I'm a caramel colored skinned Black woman with long hair and wearing a purple t-shirt. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thanks. So I have assisted suicide laws are dangerous. I'm probably gonna go over probably everything y'all said, but I'll go ahead. So assisted suicide laws are dangerous because though these laws are supposed to be for people with 6 months or less to live, doctors are sometimes wrong about a terminal diagnosis. So in 2009, while living in Washington State, my mother was determined to be in the end stage of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And I was told that her death was imminent, that if I wanted to see her alive, I should get there in 2 days. She rallied, but she was still quite ill. So she was placed in hospice. Her doctor has said that her body had begun the process of dying. And though she survived 6 months of hospice, her doctor convinced her that her body was still in the process of dying, and she moved home to Colorado to die. And my mom didn't die. In fact, 6 weeks after returning to Colorado, she and I were arrested together in Washington, D.C., fighting for disability justice. She became active in her community, and she lived almost 12 years. Assisted suicide puts sick people and seniors and disabled people, especially at risk due to the view of doctors that disabled people have a lower quality of life, therefore leading them to devalue our lives. Now, add race and racial disparities in healthcare to this. And Blacks in particular receive inferior healthcare compared to whites in the area of cardiac care, diabetes, cancer, and pain management. And Blacks often die waiting for organ transplants. We're diagnosed with cancer at much later and less treatable stages. We get inferior diabetes care with more amputations. We're more likely to be written off as terminal and less likely to have access to medical care. COVID has killed Black and Latina and Indigenous people at higher rates than whites. In fact, some Indigenous communities have literally been wiped out. As a Black Latina, I didn't see assisted suicide as part of my culture. And this is borne out in a 2013 Pew study that shows that Blacks and Latinos are 65% opposed to assisted suicide. And in states where it's legal, rarely use the program. Assisted suicide proponents tend to be white professional and managerial class folks. Assisted suicide laws are immunity for doctors. They're written to protect them and designed so that there's no oversight, no reporting requirements, and in most cases, the actual cause of death is not listed. Rather, the underlying condition is listed. In fact, the word suicide is never mentioned. Even the name of these bills and procedures are euphemisms: medical aid in dying, death with dignity, etc. So although proponents cite pain as the primary reason they want assisted suicide, the top 5 reasons people ask for assisted suicide, according to the Oregon data, are loss of autonomy, loss of dignity, loss of the ability to do things they once loved, loss of bodily control, such as incontinence and vomiting, feelings of being a physical, emotional, or financial burden on family, friends, and caregivers. All of these are disability-related issues that can be addressed with home-based care services and supports. The pain can be addressed by effective pain control, palliative care, and palliative sedation. What's
Anita?
especially dangerous. So I stopped.
Anita, this is Matt. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you short. Our session is going to end up having to close automatically. So I just wanted to thank you for your comments and your attendance and your witness. And I'm sure that if Daryl or any of the other journalists who might end up watching the recording of this have questions for you, Bill Pierce would be happy to put you in touch with them. So for any further questions, please do contact Bill Pierce at WPIERCE@apcoworldwide.com. We thank everyone for their attendance and for coming and for your kind attention to this critical piece of legislation. And that concludes our press conference for today. Thanks so much again. Take care.
And thank you, Matt. As a reminder, this was recorded. It will be shared. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Excellent.